Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
Yeah, I mean, it was always a crazy moment. It must have been probably back in maybe 2013, 2014. I just got an email out of the blue from Pat. And
Really?
as you can imagine, I just got up and I was like in my pajamas with a cup of tea. I was like, whoa!
Oh man, seriously.
And he just said, I think he'd been doing an interview in England with somebody who I knew. And I think they'd passed on a copy of what was my first album, an album called Perception. I think
Perception,
to Pat. And Pat is incredible at sort of checking out things. He's a sort of Uber checker outer, so he checks out lots of albums and goes to lots of gigs in New York. And and he just sent me this email saying, "Oh, I've been checking out your stuff for some time, and keep up the good work, and hopefully." So obviously it took me about 8 days to write a 4-line response because I wanted every word to be perfect. So, I said, thanks very much, that's great. And then a couple of years later, so this would have probably been about 2014, I think, maybe, he was playing in London, and I can't remember now. I think he emailed to say, yeah, he emailed me to say, I'm playing at London. Would you like a couple of tickets for the show?
Oh wow, that's
because he's really great like that, and he remembers where people are and that kind of side of things. So I was like, yeah, fantastic, of course. And then I thought, which is sort of a bit unlike me, but I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Why not kind of? So I wrote back and said, do you think there's any chance we could just meet up and have a play?
Oh wow.
Never really expecting it to happen, and certainly having been involved with his touring for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, knowing how incredibly hardcore the tours are, I'm even more amazed that. But I was really fortunate. I think the next day he had a travel day, like basically a day off before the next concert, the day after that. So he actually kind of changed his own personal flight to split the rest of the group and the crew and everything to stay in London for an extra day, and I booked there used to be a lovely little venue called The Forge, which was a tiny concert hall for about 50 seats in London. It had a nice little Steinway, and so I booked this place out, and we just sort of met up. I picked him up from his hotel, and we just sort of met up for a couple of hours and had a play. And yeah, of course, we were just playing all these tunes. We played Falling Grace, the great Steve Swallow.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, that was obviously incredible, sort of nerve-wracking, but amazing life moment, really. Because that was like, blimey, this is playing James and songs off travels and that with him just there. I mean, obviously I was absolutely terrified, but again, it kind of all made sense. I was sort of brought up on that music, so it's a slight diversion. I mean, obviously it's a strange situation to be in because I loved so much of that. I love so much of that music, and of course Lyle was a huge, the main, as a piano player, part of that. And for me, I even when he was still alive, I kind of knew that they weren't going to be playing together again. And I was as gutted as that about that as anyone is, because that musical relationship between the two of them was one of the greatest, musical relationships in art, and certainly in our genre of music, if not anywhere. But it has been a really strange experience in some ways, because of course I'm just trying to do my best on the gigs and on the album that we did. That's beautiful, And the reason I mention this, because I do, I feel hopefully I'm kind of qualified to do that gig. I don't mean that in any way, in an arrogant way, but in terms of just the fact that music is completely ingrained on my brain as much as it would be for anyone, I think, because I love it so much. So it's not for me difficult to play, because that's how music feels like to me, because that's how I started off. But it is strange because if you're stupid enough to look on the internet and then ever check any kind of message boards or anything like that, then of course there are people like, oh, it's not Lyle Mays, and it kind of does hurt, because you just like want to say, well, of course I know that, and I'm as gutted as you are that I'm not Lyle Mays, but I can only do me.
You're you, yeah, and you bring
trying to do my best for it. And of course, it's just
there's
only a couple of people who say that, but of course when you read that, it always hurts a little bit. But I completely understand, because in some ways I feel the same.
But did you?